the swing states, and we're not talking about Ohio and Pennsylvania here and the Republican swing states. We're talking about sovereign nations that you're coming out and predicting are going to be swinging away from the U.S., moving their alliance towards the east. So how do each of these factor into this resolution? And let's dig down a bit here into the swing states.
Well, there are four nations that I identify, and I think they're all extremely important. I think all four are going to be firmly in the Eurasian trade zone camp. And when that happens, and I can actually say that one is already fait accompli, done deal. Another one is in progress, but much more hidden. When that happens, you're going to see the United States very isolated. I mean, talk about isolation in the last couple of years. That's been a pretty important theme of mine, how the U.S. will exert pressure, say, with Iran sanctions, and before you know it, a couple of European nations break away and say, well, we're going to continue dealing with Iran. Before you know it, you got the United States making so many rules that no one wants to play with them anymore. They were isolated before World War I. They're going to be isolated again as the fascist nation. So what are the four nations? It's Germany, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Japan. Okay, in order, let's just follow this. Germany has significant technology. The Eurasian trade zone, let's just think it's China and Russia and a lot of other nations. They're going to want the technology transfer from Germany. If you look at construction equipment in China, you see some Japanese, but you see a lot of German. I mean, that device that sucks up cement and drops it on the 7th floor, that sucking machine that deposits cement, that's German. They got the lock on that market. They have the lock on a lot of things. Obviously not cranes. A lot of countries make cranes. But we're going to see Germany important for investment capital. Watch Frankfurt explode as an RMB hub. That term is coming up a lot. It means renminbi hub. It means a hub for trading bonds and issuing bonds and converting currency from the Chinese yuan denomination. So it's the RMB hub. Watch a lot of the business connections with Russia and China. I think we're going to see the importance of the 3,000 German companies doing. Question. If 3,000 German companies are doing business in Russia, will Germany follow through on a sanctions? I mean, what a stupid concept. Germany is not going to follow through on any sanctions with Russia. 40% of the natural gas used by Germany comes from Russia. 30% of all the crude oil used in Germany comes from Russia. You think they're going to sanction their own energy suppliers? What a stupid concept. No, Germany already has strong commercial ties with Russia and extremely firm but newer ties with China. They're going to flip, and what I've been told is that Angela Merkel, even though she was just reelected, she's been told, you're on the way out. You just don't represent us anymore. You want to continue to sing in total harmony with the U.S., EU, UK banker cabal, then fine, because you don't sing in harmony with our corporate sector here in Germany. I've heard rumors. It's kind of strange, but I'll just pass it on. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it's a rumor. Angela Merkel is trying to be dismissed from her current chancellor position, which is like their president, prime minister of Germany. She's trying to see a nice transition. The trouble is she doesn't speak English. But, you know, neither does the recent African leader of the UN. I mean, I don't know that you've got to be a real strong English-speaking Secretary General. All you really need to do is be a little bit dishonest in order to follow through on the UN global takeover plan, which I don't want to get into. All right, watch Frankfurt eclipse London. London is always expecting, oh, we're going to be the primary hub for the RMB trade. Really? Do you have corporate interest behind those RMB trades? Well, we're still going to be the biggest. Well, you watch Frankfurt trot out their connections with the businesses that are doing business in China and Russia, and that'll be the big advantage lever. All right, enough of Germany. I think they're going to flip, and when it flips, there are going to be a lot of countries that follow, like France. Watch the pigs follow whatever Germany does, but with a lot of difficulty. All right, Turkey is the next swing state. They're the historical fence sitter. You could look back 1,000 years and still see, well, they got significant European ties, like, you know, the Ottoman Empire. Budapest is in Hungary. Influence. My Buddha, that's Budapest. Okay, Turkey's got this gold intermediary function, and they're not going to give it up. What happened after the Iran sanctions by the U.S., U.K., and EU, following like a French poodle in subservience, what you had was the Turks acting as intermediary for the Indians to buy Iranian oil. There's your three-way triangle. India bought Iran's oil and gas and paid for it to Tehran private banks in gold that they bought in Turkey. And that worked around because the dumbasses in the U.S. government who set up the Iran sanctions, which was stupid to begin with, just forgot to include private Iranian banks in the sanctions. So India used private Iranian banks as intermediaries. I mean, golly, we are just so full of stupid U.S. government leadership, which I believe has treason as its business card. Okay, it's important for the dollar alternative, what I call the trade settlement prototype in gold. Turkey's important for that. It's the most important country for gold trade in the entire Muslim Arab region. The shipment of gold to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates is enormous. And from enormous. So they've already got 1 foot, Turkey does, in the east, and 1 foot in the west. They're the toll taker. They take the fees at the bridge. They control the Bosphorus Straits. Right now, they're making important energy deals with Russia. I don't mean just for supply. I'm talking about things like, you know, pipelines and enormous storage facilities for gas. Not LNG so much, but gas facilities. But in addition to that, generating plants for electricity in Turkey, done by Russian contractors. You think Turkey's going to follow through on sanctions against Russia? I don't think so. This is how stupid the U.S. government policy is, and destined to fail. So you've got also the Turkish Incirlik Air Force Base, the NATO Air Force Base. That's the primary first stop for U.S. heroin coming out of Afghanistan. So you think the Turks are going to stop the heroin running? I don't think so. The third nation, let's get out of that topic quickly. The third nation is Saudi Arabia. This is already a done deal. The divorce is done. It's over with. The papers have been signed, or at least they're, well, I think they're almost to be signed, or the ink is still wet. The Saudis have had their divorce with the United States. In I think it was early April or late March, the gay prince, I'm sorry, President Obama, to Riyadh for a summit meeting. And it had all kinds of little State Department pamphlets and online, oh, look at this, the United States is going to meet with the royals of Saudi Arabia and just assure that relations are strong. Okay, well, they had to tear up all the pamphlets, gather them all up, and pretend the meeting didn't exist because the summit meeting lasted 20 minutes. So what did King Abdullah tell Obama? What did Obama try to tell Abdullah? My guess is they had a lot of arguments over things like continued Treasury bond support, over things like continued terrorism across the Arab region, including, say, Lebanon and Syria. My guess is they had a lot of arguments about Saudi Arabia wanting détente with Iran. Okay, so you get the idea. There's another news item came out last month that a new crown prince has been designated among the Saudi royals, and it's not the Prince Bandar line. It's not the U.S.-UK favorable line. So what you're seeing now is the Saudis line up their heirs to the throne that are favorable to the East, not to the West. This is dead petrodollar events. These are signposts that are in snow, except for the American and British analysts who are paid not to look that way. Most likely, my guess is that China ordered the Saudis and the Iranians to make peace, engage in détente, stop the violence, quit funding the U.S.-sponsored al-Qaeda terrorism. Al-Qaeda is spelled AL-CIA-DA. Wake up. So my guess is we're going to soon see the Saudis are going to make a very big announcement, and I believe it's going to be part of Chinese requirements to accept any payment for Saudi oil shipments in a major currency, any major currency. British pounds, euros, Swiss franc, Japanese yen. That doesn't matter, as long as it's a major currency. They don't want Thai baht, okay? They might take South Korean yuan. I don't know. Maybe the South Koreans will gather up some Japanese yen to pay. But we're going to see the Saudis and the petrodollar with a formal announcement that they'll accept any major currency. Watch all the OPEC nations follow, like Nigeria and the entire Persian Gulf nations, like Kuwait, Oman, lots of different countries. They're going to take non-dollars. At the same time, watch OPEC completely lose its steam, its influence in the next month, I believe. And the meeting has to do with all the different major natural gas exporting nations. Well, gee, that kind of sounds like the OPEC, oil-producing export nations, export countries. But we're going to see the natural gas co-op that's dominated by Gazprom and Russia. And I think the key major support will be from Iran, which I read an astonishing figure that over 30%, maybe as much as 35% of global gas reserves are under Iran control. Wow. Okay, Qatar is a major center for Arab gas and LNG. Well, they're inviting Gazprom into their camp right now for technology transfer. They're trying to get some, new construction and new agreements for LNG port facilities. They're not easy to make. Okay, so the Saudis, I think it's a done deal. They've already flipped. You just won't read about it in the controlled U.S. press. The fourth nation is much more high risk, and that's Japan. I don't want to get into the attack on Fukushima. We call it a natural incident in the West because our press writes the press reports. But in the East, in Russia, in China, and Japan, they called it an attack. They called it an attack. They called it an attack. Very clear language. Attack. Okay? Fukushima was an attack. Japan, therefore, has to be very careful. They're courting right now Russia. They've got a large crew of Russian engineers working on pipelines and LNG facilities without visas. And their project is to connect up with the continent, with Korea. Okay, so watch North Korea. I don't want to get into North Korea and how strange they are and any succession or rumors of an unusual death by their little queer leader. But something's going on with Korea. Watch them link up with China and Russia with the pipelines. So, like we had the backfire in the Iran sanctions, we're having the backfire in the Fukushima attacks because Japan is now working with Russia through the Chinese landmass with Gazprom and Rosneft energy pipelines. The whole Northeast Pacific is a major development zone now. The Sea of Okhotsk is under Russian development. We're also seeing the Siberian coast develop its LNG facilities. It's kind of interesting. If you're in the frozen northeast of Siberia, you don't need to freeze much for cold. So we're going to see Japan and Korea join up, work out these commercial deals. So the U.S. is going to work the political and military angle, and the Japanese and Koreans, they're going to work the commercial angle. They're going to jump from the Western fold into the Eurasian trade zone. So watch these swing states. I think Japan is not a done deal so much because their prime minister, this Abe, he's nothing but an American tool who has really angered all the major political elements and banking elements and commercial elements in Japan. I don't see his term, it's not so much a term. A prime minister really has coalition support. Watch him lose his coalition support in Japan real soon, John.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep our eye out for Abe losing his coalition support, and obviously those are major events to have those four nations swing away from U.S. alliance and towards the east. The U.S. economy, Jim, it appears to be accelerating in its recession. Really never ended the recession. Well, statistically, in the U.S. press, it did, but in all practicality, it really never ended. And we appear to be accelerating into a new dip or a new decline. The housing market's rolling over again here in the U.S. What's happening in the U.S. economy in your view?
Well, first of all, I pay no attention to the NBER and their politically driven pronouncements of recession or no recession. When I was in graduate school at Carnegie Mellon, the chairman of my department was actually a key consultant for the NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research. And I was told then, Jim, this is the most prestigious economic think tank in the United States. It's got some Boston roots, and it's really competent. And what I've learned over the years is, no, it's not competent. No, it's not. They take marching orders. So I really wonder if my old department chairman was part of justifying false policy and false conditions, or whether he was really bothered by it all but continued with his lucrative consulting work. You have to factor in the 4 to 5% standard lie. What I mean by that is, what is the price inflation in the United States? Well, I follow accurate calculations by John Williams at the Shadow Government Statistics Group. He now has declared and measured that the, give or take. Okay, so if the United States government tells me that it's 1.5, let's just call it 1 or 2, then what's the lie? It's 4 or 5%. So they're calling price inflation on the nominal gross domestic product. By that I mean just add up all the numbers without any adjustment for inflation. Just what are the raw nominal numbers? They're calling the growth in the raw nominal numbers, they're calling it growth. They're calling it economic growth. It's not economic growth. They're calling inflation economic growth. So now, even with their 4 to 5% lie, we've got a recession in the first quarter of something on the order of 1%. I don't know if it's 1 1/4, 3/4%. I don't give a crap, because I don't pay much attention to their stinking lies and propaganda. Because I don't care what they claim their deflator is. What they need to deflate is the hot air propaganda coming out of their stinking mouths. You got the retail sector that's actually in a free fall. I mean, I pulled out an article recently, and it had 20 different retail chain type firms, all of them in negative territory, in you know what they call comp sales. What's our sales like this quarter versus last year's same quarter for stores that were in existence a year ago, so we can make a like kind comparison. Store X in New York a year ago, that first quarter, versus Store X this year first quarter. It's called comp sales, comparable sales. Well, that's a very important measuring stick. We use it all the time when I was at Staples for 5 years in the late 90s. All right, so you're getting this free fall in retail. And you know, people like to say, well, retail drives the economy. No, it doesn't. Retail and consumption does not drive the U.S. economy. It's the backwards thinking for the propaganda artists who want you to think that way. When you're doing home equity pullouts 5 years ago, 8 years ago, so that you can go on vacation or go to school or pay your bills, that's burning your furniture. That's not driving an economy. That's converting your capital into spending cash, spendable cash, what they call discretionary income. It's not even discretionary income. It's discretionary spendable funds. Okay, that's not driving an economy. What we're seeing now is some stark, ugly, extreme evidence in two forms. And I put out a public article somewhere around 2 months ago where I showed the money supply going from $800 billion in the year 2008 to the recent calculation, which is a 6-year jump 5-fold. Gee, did that not kickstart the economy? Did that not provide stimulus for the economy? No, it's evidence of systemic failure. What's the flip side? Where did all the money go and how fast is it moving? Well, you look at the money velocity measure, and it's way down in the last 7 years. It's gone from a 2.03 times versus a 1.75 times now. So since 2007 to now, 7 years, not quite full years, you've got a 25% reduction in money velocity.
And just to substantiate that, Jim, usually if you're in a recovery, the velocity will pick back up as the economic activity picks back up. And we haven't seen that since 2008. It's continued to decline, and M2 velocity, I think, is at 20-year lows right now.
Yes, it is. And why is that? It's because the money that's being shoved into the system is for Wall Street bailouts. It's for coverage of derivative failures. It's for covering and redeeming Wall Street bonds, making it sound like stimulus for the economy, yet it's money denied to the mainstream. And you even look at the major banks, and they've made harder harder their approval process for, say, bank loans by a company. Oh, no, you don't have sufficient collateral for that. And sorry, but you don't have good performance in your company for the last 6 months. You're not a good credit risk. So what is the good credit risk? The dead, hollow reed, insolvent big banks. Those are great credit risks, even though they're all dead. So what you're seeing is a 5-fold increase in the money supply and a 25% decrease in the money velocity. What adds to the slowdown? What makes slower, I should say, the slowdown in money velocity, but low interest rates? All the savers out there outnumber all the people on consumer loans. That's the funny little fact of life. It's like half as it's like 50% larger, 70% larger. The volume of CDs, of savers, the amount of money put into the system looking for a yield on savings is 50 to 70% larger than the amount of money on consumer loans. So we like to talk about the stimulus of cheaper car loans, of cheaper mortgages. Well, gee, we're down to under 4% for the adjustable rate mortgage and the 30-year mortgage, but is that stimulating the housing market? No. Why? Because we've got all these different negative influences. I have been that professional economists don't notice that 0% interest and QE with unsterilized bond monetization is a deadweight millstone wet blanket on the U.S. economy, slowing the system down, raising the cost structure, vanishing the profit margin, and killing capital by forcing it into retired status. If you've got a small business or a big company's business unit, business segment, sometimes they call it, and it's lost its profit margin from higher costs, well, what happens? Well, you shut it down. You take the widget machines offline. You put them in a warehouse. You take all the computers and you move into other businesses, or you liquidate them. You find a liquidator that gives you 70 cents on the dollar or 60 cents on the dollar for your equipment, and you retire the capital. The end result of ZERP and QE is capital destruction. Wake up, you PhD economists. You're idiots. You're morons. You're harlots for Wall Street. You're spokesmen for the U.S. government. I'm not even a PhD economist. I'm a statistics PhD. And I like to say in my bio, unencumbered by the limitations of economics credentials. Why is it that I have correct forecasts and these PhD economists don't? Why is it that I see the capital destruction and the PhD economists don't?
I'm going to say it's because you're paid by subscribers who want access to real data rather than the big banks and those who want to market.
Exactly. I'm paid to notice what's really going on. I'm not a Wall Street harlot, and I'm not a government spokesman. So we're not seeing the policy work. And, you know, the sad tragedy of it all is if QE doesn't work, do QE2. If that doesn't work, do Operation Twist and confuse people. Then if that doesn't work, do QE3. And if your taper talk fails, continue with it anyway and just lie. Continue with Q3 and lie and use the Belgian bulge. So we're not seeing success from policy, and you got to question, well, what is their objective? My understanding of their objective is to crash the economy and institute global fascism. I mean, gosh, you had Joe Biden at the Air Force Academy giving a commencement speech just a few days ago, and he was very open about it. He said the U.S. is the leading nation to enforce the New World Order. I never like to get into NWO conversations, but gosh, our vice president did, and no one even criticized him. Gee, is this the jackboots and Gestapo talking? I think it probably is. All right, there's an Obamacare. Is that intended to help the U.S. economy? I don't think so. So what's the effect of Obamacare? Well, companies, large and small, are taking all their marginal employees and making them part-time so they don't have to pay into it. And they're also laying people off. So, gosh, I think Obamacare killed some jobs. Way to go, Obama. Gee, when you were at Columbia, bullshit, did you take any economics courses? No one saw you on campus, so where were you? We've got these Manchurian candidates and narco princes parading around as leaders. You got Jimmy Carter, half-brother of the Kennedys, parading as president, who continued with a lot of the State Department policy in the Middle East with Kissinger, who was basically a Rockefeller agent. You've got Clinton bastard grandson of the Rockefellers, parading as president, finally got impeached over stains on a dress and how do you define the word is. I mean, gosh, our leadership has become a stinking joke. It's a joke, and they're not working toward the Constitution. They enabled its shredding with the Patriot Act. 9/11 was a coup d'etat. Building 7 had all kinds of J.P. Morgan. Building 7, never hit by an airplane. Gee, structural sympathy made it fall. My joke with structural sympathy regarding the third building in World Trade is I've felled only a few trees in my life with a chainsaw. It's not an easy thing to do. You've got to throw a rope over an upper branch and pull hard on it to make sure you control its fall. But I had a smart friend, and you know, if structural sympathy were the case, you could cut down 3 or 4 trees in a forest and a couple of the other ones would fall in sympathy. It just doesn't happen that way. So wake up, United States. 10% I think is awake, and I give them a lot of credit. They're buying gold. They don't buy the 9/11 garbage story. The architects and engineers have their AE 1000 group. We're starting to see more and more information now come out. It's coming from the East. It's coming from the Snowden file source. About 9/11, what was it all about? I hope they come up with some evidence about what Oklahoma City was all about, because that has Fannie Mae trails to it. Now, we've got a nation that's pretty much been taken over, John, and they're trying to crash the system. They're going to increase QE, and they're going to lie better about it. They're going to continue with the bond monetization. They're not going to sterilize anything. They're trying to convince us that they're going to do more sterilization as they buy new bonds with printed money. They're not going to do that. They're going to continue using the proxies and exchange stabilization fund and what Rob Kirby likes to call the artificial demand through the interest rate swap derivatives with leverage of 50 to 1. They can create bond demand, and they've created some bond rallies that were totally artificial in nature. So a lot of weird things going on, and I think people need to wake up to the reality that we've pretty much lost our nation for its leadership, and it's going to be very difficult to take back. I think we're more likely to be reindustrialized with Chinese masters, and the United States is going to lose its dollar credit card in the process of the Eurasian trade zone coming into being. They're going to have gold-backed currencies. They're going to have a stepping stone of fully convertible yuan currency, and then later a gold-backed yuan currency. Both China and Russia, I should say each of China and Russia, they each have over 20,000 tons of gold. I mean, these official numbers are as stupid and full of lies as the U.S. has, you know, economic growth. The Chinese have decided long ago, we're going to play your game of lies, and we're going to tell you that we have 1,000 tons of gold when we've got, you know, closer to 15 to 20,000. There's no need to tell the Americans the truth on gold ownership. Just follow through with the Eurasian trade zone sourcing device. We're getting into some key turning point events, and you know, a lot of people were pointing to mid-April as a key currency reset event, and you know, I kept telling people, well, you know, they might be working toward that, but what's delay upon delay upon delay. Now we're hearing mid-July as a key turning point event for currency resets and, you know, dollar policy, and I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be a very strange mix of disruptive events, and I don't have all the answers, but I do have, I think, a keen sense of a lot of the trails. And I don't pay any attention to mainstream news. I hardly ever watch it anymore. I have a strange phenomenon going on with me, John. I wake up in the morning, I do some work, and I do some errands and whatever, do some more reading of emails, and I struggle. What day is it? The market's open? I don't even care. What day is it? I often think it's Saturday because I don't turn on CNBC or Bloomberg News. I often think it's Saturday. I think it's Saturday right now. It's not. It's what? It's Thursday, right? No, it's Tuesday. I'm losing track. I'm losing my orientation because of all the corrupt market activity, because of all the propaganda and lies. I mean, I got some informed American friends, I should say intelligent American friends, who think that Russia attacked Ukraine. I mean, they're just clueless.
Well, Jim, we've covered a lot of big, critical and important topics today, from the Gazprom $300 billion deal a couple of weeks ago, and the implications on that, to the Belgian bulge of U.S. Treasury bonds, and your theory that it could be the BRICS sourcing of gold reserves for a new coming central bank, as well as your prediction of the big swing states swinging away from the U.S. To the east, and the big swing states being Germany, France, Japan, and the Saudis. And that, in my mind, is probably one of the most monumental predictions you've ever made. And if we do see that happen, it's going to have profound implications on the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy, and the reserve status of the dollar, obviously, as if some of the largest Western economies, particularly Germany and Japan, shift away from U.S. alliance and move to the east. So I think we'll wrap things up there. We'll let listeners, we've given them an hour already, we'll let them listen to that 2 or 3 times to let everything sink in if they want. But before we let you go, if you could let the listeners know a little bit more about where to find your regular work, besides the public hat trick articles, of course, which are going to be read on Silver Doctors. Where do they find your subscription reports?
Well, the website, goldenjackass.com. It's got a free public domain area where I have a web page full of interviews like this and public articles. The public articles are meant to inform and try to instruct to some degree, but to be honest, I regard them as not so successful if they don't result in new orders placed for my newsletter. I'm in a business running the Hat Trick Letter newsletter. So my public articles they're functional, and I appreciate compliments from people about them, but they're shameless promotional pieces to try to gather more clients. And that's fine. I don't mind if people never sign up and read the public articles if they awaken to what's going on. So I've got the public area, but then there's the Hat Trick Letter. It consists of 2 different monthly reports that come out each month. It's the Money War Report for high-level incidents, events, factors, and the Gold and Currency Report, which is for ground-level incidents, factors, and lots of different things like, coin demand. I quote some things from your website on silver coin demand from the United States. There's a lot of stuff going on at the high level, which is a war to preserve the dollar regime in place with its satellite of paper currency. But then there's a ground level battle. It's mostly with demand and movement away from the dollar for trade usage. And I cover that with the Golden Currency Report. So those 2 reports cover a lot of material. And there's so much going on that in the last month, John, I had 2 special reports. I mean, it's incredible what's going on. I had a special report on just the military angle for NATO and contractors doing business with Russia and China. Europe has contractors doing business with Europe and China, with Russia and China. They're not going to sanction to get rid of their own business. I had another special report on the collapse of the U.S. economy called Dead Man Walking. That was my second special report for the month. So a lot is going on. It's overwhelming what's going on. And my biggest decisions when I write the newsletter is, what do I not include, because I can't cover it all. So I try to rotate topics. So it's all very interesting and very difficult, but I'm glad for my background in marketing research, which was multidimensional analysis. This is difficult. And I don't buy into the propaganda for my work. I don't buy into the BS coming out of the government. I don't assume there's a recovery. I don't assume that Wall Street acts in your best interest. I look to see where's their crime. Where's their fraud? Where's their cover-up? And, the banker murders are part of their cover-up. And the banker murders is covering up the London whale, J.P. Morgan, interest rate derivative loss of over $100 billion. They don't want that information to get out. So they kill people. It's sad. It's sad what's going on. We're losing our key cradle of capitalism and beacon of freedom. We're losing it in the United States. It's sad what's going on.
Sure is.
I'm a patriot. I am a patriot. I just don't live in the country anymore. I don't want to get thrown in jail without charges, because that's the risk.
All right. So Jim Willie, editor of the Hat Trick Letter on goldenjackass.com. Check out goldenjackass.com for both of those monthly private reports.